Hi, and welcome to Drafting Compliance. I'm Kayne, he's Tom, and we talked with special guest Eric Holtzclaw last time. Today, we're talking with our special guest Victoria Southall, the Director of Cybersecurity, Governance, Risk, and Compliance at Everfox. But before we get to that, we have some beers. What are we drinking today, Victoria?
Well, I am not much of a beer drinker, so I really couldn't decide. So I picked three. So we're gonna have a fun time today. We've got a shock top, we've got a Samuel Adams Summer Ale, and a Blue Moon. And I have already put oranges in all of them because I wasn't sure if I was supposed to or not.
Wow. You are an
Wow,
absolute.
pro.
You're way ahead of it. Yeah.
I'm
You
prepared
claim you
today.
didn't know what you're doing, but seems like you know what you're doing.
I don't. They two of them have oranges on them, so that's it was
Yeah.
kind of a cheat. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And so
I'm not going to
we'll.
try and fit these in my beer chalice that Tom sent me. So I'm just going to be using these little. It's kind of like what is it? You do like a wine flight or a whiskey flight. So I'm doing a beer flight today, apparently.
Yeah.
A
I
beer
have three
flight. Yep.
glasses, so I'm going to use all three of my glasses. But
All right,
so
and
we'll
these are
start. I think we
probably
should.
like ones that just have to open, right?
Yeah. I think we should start with the shock top.
Okay, that's this. That's
Um,
this one.
that's the
It's
orange one for you
very
who like color coda.
cloudy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
This will
smells
be
nice.
cloudy. I'm drinking mine out of a can, which is
Oof, that
probably
We're,
smells
how
we're
it should
trying
interesting
it
be.
just to
now,
begin with.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead and
Yep,
crack it, and
I'm pouring it
I'm going to
now,
pour.
and oh, it's clear though. Or it's semi-clear.
Yeah, it's pretty hazy, honestly. It's an
It's very
unfiltered
it's
wheat.
very light though.
It's very light. Yeah,
Yeah,
Mm.
it's light colored. Should have a
smells
citrus
like
smell.
beer. Not a lot of
Mm-hmm.
bubbles. Very
Oh,
few
well,
bubbles.
well, mine is different than yours. I had quite a few bubbles.
Maybe it's the glass I'm using. It's either that or it's quite hazy. Oh, now
So
I see
Mm.
there's some bubbles. All right.
I have some
I
bubbles
would,
from the orange, I think.
oh, probably. The orange
I'm
is
trying
a
this.
is a perfect way to serve any of these beers, honestly, especially the Belgian style wheats, which would be the shock top and the blue moon. They go really
Mm-hmm.
well with orange. I think it's the coriander hop that's in them as well with it. What are you smelling there,
Ooh.
Kane?
I've already moved to tasting.
Mm.
Oh,
I
Mm.
started with smelling. It was very citrusy. I don't know if it was the beer
Yeah.
or the orange that I added in it, but I
no, it is
definitely got
very
citrus.
citrusy. It's on the nose is better than the actual taste. This is one that kind of got a
I
weird
find it.
mouthfeel as well.
Yeah,
It's
it's a
soft.
little soft. Yeah, it's a little creamy but a little soft. And then on the nose, I get citrus, and I also get definitely the bready smell underneath the citrus. So
Oh
Hmm.
yeah, I definitely
I
get that too.
I love these beers. So if I'm not drinking a hoppy beer, I'm probably drinking one of these, Kane. So
Okay, well that's good to know. The next time I'm over at yours, I'll know to bring hoppy beers or one of these.
yeah.
What's funny is that my local beer store did not have any of these. They actually looked rather disappointed in me for having asked. I had to go to the
Well,
grocery store to actually buy these.
I can explain that. So these would be macro craft brews. So these
Okay.
are all backed by major breweries. They were in many people's kind of craft beer experience. These would have been some of the first things they tried, especially the Blue Moon, probably then the Shock Top.
Oh, okay.
Sam Adams is if you go back in the '90s, they were sort of the first on the scene in the craft brewery scene, at least where I lived. So you would have tried something like their cherry wheat or their stout. Completely different taste than you would have had traditionally. But now they are thought of as sort of the 800-pound gorillas in the macro craft brew areas.
Okay.
Ah, okay.
Well, that does help. I will say I went on a Samuel Adams brewery tour when I was in, I want to say Boston some years ago. A friend took me on it. It was fine other than the beer. Interesting history.
Well, I say let's start, and then we will between questions we'll crack another one.
Oh, okay. So we're not gonna, I didn't know if we were going to kick off with just the one. So Tom, you can decide when we're going to open our next one, or Victoria, when you get tired of the two of us bantering back and forth, you can tell us when to pick the next one. But Victoria,
Okay.
before the show, before we got talking, we were actually talking about FedRAMP and how um, that affected Everfox. And just for our viewers, can you start by explaining the significance of FedRAMP for your company and what initially led them to pursue a FedRAMP authority to operate or an ATO?
So Everfox did not pursue an ATO for any of their products. We are a new company that stood up from we were initially Force Point Federal. So we broke off from ForcePoint in October of last year and became Everfox. With that being said, I have been with organizations previously that have pursued a FedRAMP ATO, and that really comes from their product service offering, and what they want to tailor their product to the to government entities, and they're hosted in a cloud environment. So that's what led to that at previous organizations that I've been to.
Okay, so they weren't actually pursuing it for themselves, and you were also talking about an annual security review, and that it had resulted in a 3-year provisional ATO renewal. So, what were some of the challenges and successes that you encountered on that?
So some of the things that we encountered, of course, are making sure that we are closing out POAM items in a timely manner, that everyone's able to answer the questions that are being asked by the 3PAO, and following up with documentation, making sure everything is in line for that annual security review. So going through and doing the scans and making sure you've got such a small window where they say, all right, well, you have to perform and upload scans within a week. Having to do that multiple times if we can't do that in a timely fashion. So there's a lot of challenges that go into the security review, making sure that everybody is in the meeting when they need to be and things like that. Some of the successes that we encountered, other than completing it and being cleared to renew, just being able to get everything in a timely manner and not having a already long annual security review process being drug out 2-3 times longer than it needs to be, or having to redo anything and have those costs to the 3PAO go up as a result.
Yeah, certainly those annual reviews, really the ConMon package in general, whether it's month to month or the annual piece, that requires some organizational skills that some organizations that I'm familiar with that have tried to go through it, they just didn't have the muscle. They had never worked that muscle in the information security team well enough that it's a challenge for lots of organizations. And certainly you mentioned the POAM piece, and I would say it's probably an 80% hit rate. When I ask people what are their challenges, the POAM is probably the number one thing folks talk about. So I don't think you're unique there, although I'm sure your organization had its unique variables associated with those things.
Yes, absolutely. The POAM is always the big one.
But you also talked about some blocking and tackling more than anything else. Tom, are we seeing some of that already at Hyperproof with, as Victoria said, just making sure people are in the right meetings at the right time?
Well, I think anytime you have a large project, you see that sort of difficulty, right? I mean, you're talking about cross-functional groups coming together to do something, right? So everybody has different agendas, different times, and different challenges. So we certainly see some of that. Sort of our methodology, Kayne, is to try to automate as much of this as we can, either within our own platform, which automates a big piece of it, or through some of our other tool sets. So things like Confluence and Jira help us automate some things that would typically be in a meeting setting, right?
Okay.
Yeah, Jira and Confluence is a huge resource, especially for ConMon.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with that.
And hopefully Jira will improve their cloud offering so that it is FedRAMP at some near future date.
Kayne, I'll drink to that. Should we?
Are we already opening a second beer just based on that idea?
Should we drink?
They haven't done it yet.
No,
let's go for it.
Yeah, but I'll still drink to the possibility that they do it. We're going with yellow for your.
Yellow accident.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Sam Adams.
Happy accident as well. So Victoria's at a company called Everfox. Turns out I have I think it comes through on there. I have a fox on my beer coaster or my wine coaster with bottle opener. Yeah. So we're on the Everfox show with the fox themed things, and we're drinking Sam Adams. Clearly,
it's meant to be.
This is their summer ale.
I like the smell.
It should
of this
smell
one.
like lemons.
I do like the smell.
At least that's how I remember it. I haven't drank one of these in a while, but it's much clearer, much crisper.
Oh, it's very citrusy smelling. Yeah, you're right.
More effervescent.
Is that called a shandy, where it's lemonade and beer?
That's when a fruit juice is mixed with a beer. This is not a shandy.
Okay, but is that what the smell would like? Maybe.
Lemonade
and beer.
Yeah. Yeah, it smells fantastic.
It it dies off pretty quickly on the nose. Like it initially was very citrusy, and now it's not nearly so much.
Gets a little air. I'm going to taste it.
Yeah. And
I liked it. It was a little bit heavier than the shock top, but I like the flavor better.
Yeah. Yeah, the mouthfeel is definitely heavier, which you wouldn't guess by the look of it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's got a little bit of got citrus at the end. It's oily a term you use when discussing beer?
Sure.
It's kind of got it's got an oily mouthfeel
Oily?
to me. It coats. What's that thing you always say, Tom? Coats your tongue and makes you want to go for more. In my case, go find like a toothbrush and like scrape my tongue off.
Yeah, my saying is coats the tongue and invite you back for a second drink. But
that's never been my experience.
Yeah, this is a beer you would typically stick a lemon in instead of the orange with the other ones. But
and it is lighter in just slightly than the other one, the shock top.
Yeah, it's good. I like it. All right.
I don't know how I'm going to hold up all three of these at one time.
I actually enjoyed it.
The review at the end of the show will be interesting.
Oh, goodness, yes. If we can all tell the difference between all three. So I've actually lined up all three bottles so that I can at least remind myself what each one is. So, Victoria, have you ever heard of any scenarios where a company might not have had an agency sponsor, or they lost an agency sponsor during their FedRAMP ATO process? And if you have, like, how would you mitigate the risks associated with that scenario?
Well, I think really one of the biggest things that comes into having an agency sponsor up against a cloud service offering is communication. So whether it's communication to the agency, to the FedRAMP PMO office, and vice versa, keeping those lines of communication open are really important. And if you have an instance either where the agency sponsor decides not to continue to pursue the cloud service offering or continue to sponsor, or if they just completely go ghost and they don't notify the FedRAMP PMO office, then that's something that really falls on the cloud service offering to do that. And just keep that open line of communication with them to ensure that, hey, we can show proof of every year that we're continuing our ConMon activities, and we are trying to find a new agency sponsor, and keeping those lines of communication open, constantly showing the effort that we are looking for a new sponsor or trying to gain a new sponsor, pursuing other avenues such as potentially state ramp. So those are different ways that you can mitigate the risk. There is, I believe it's a 12-month window that the CSP has in order to either find a new sponsor before they risk losing their FedRAMP authorization. Yeah. So they do have a 12-month period to work with a 3PAO and maybe potentially move to an in-process status while they're looking for that sponsor.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I would point out is if you have a sponsor, do not treat them like any old customer.
Right.
You should tie yourself to them pretty closely. You should be in a regular communication cadence with them. You should turn their counterpart to you in their organization into your best friend. The best way to mitigate it is to not let it happen.
Exactly.
To not lose the sponsor. Yeah,
absolutely.
But I want to go back on something you said there, Victoria, which I don't think I've heard before, which was about using like a state level sponsor as an alternative path, which seems to me a bit unusual for FedRAMP. How do you think state level agencies would react to the outreach there?
Well, you got to get creative. And I think that if you're not getting any type of response in trying to find a FedRAMP agency, but you're wanting to maintain that, that 853 level baseline as a cloud service offering, then you got to get a little creative. And that's kind of where maybe potentially pursuing a state ramp instead of a FedRAMP comes into play. So it changes the game a little bit, but there's so much overlap between the two. And if you're able to find a state ramp sponsor and go for that instead, and you've already got the package built out from a 3PAO perspective, and you're able to show that continuing compliance through your ConMon activities and the annual security reviews through FedRAMP, turns a very long process to gain a state ramp into something that's very short because you're already doing FedRAMP.
Yeah, I don't know that it's a permanent fix. Kayne, I see the question in your eye. So I what I don't think it is it's probably going to replace the FedRAMP ATO and keep you in that marketplace for very long.
No,
But what it
you'd
does
still
show
fall out.
is you're keeping, you're still getting you're still showing a diligence,
Mm-hmm.
and your ability to recover quickly when you do have a sponsor, I think is heightened.
Right.
Yeah, but I'm also thinking it's a different set of dynamics. Like state level government has got a different level of engagement than the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on how those relationships at the state level, Victoria, would differ from federal agency sponsors?
Well, there's so many overlaps considering the different cybersecurity memos that the president has put out, the executive orders that we have to abide by. That does trickle down to the state. So as far as the dynamics go for that, there's the only difference is the state might have their own specific requirements depending on what state it is. I'm sure Washington has different requirements than Texas, and vice versa, as opposed to it being federal is federal, regardless of whether it is an agency sponsor from the Air Force or the Navy or whatever sponsor agency that there is for a FedRAMP package. The dynamics, again, they come down by varying state to state as to what their particular requirements are, but they still very closely align with FedRAMP. Again, as Tom said, to show that due diligence.
Yeah, it's still an 853.
Mm-hmm.
In our case, it'd be a moderate. Depends on where you go, but it's still that alignment. And then to your point, Victoria, you're going to see really with any kind of sponsor, whether it's one federal agency over another or a state agency over a federal, you're going to see different requirements come in, or at least a different tailoring of certain requirements depending on the agency.
Yeah, definitely. And those relationships will be different too. And exactly as you said, that when you get that agency sponsored, they need to be your best friend, and keep that relationship super tight. That would be certainly, if someone were to go pursue that route instead, that they would want to make sure that as a lesson learned, to keep that relationship tighter than they did previously.
I think that's a very good point. And it's something also other guests have talked about the necessity of having strong relationships with the agency sponsor as well as with the 3PAO throughout the process.
Absolutely. Again, that communication is so important.
Definitely. And I will say, if you're enjoying this conversation on YouTube, ring the bell to get notifications about my quest to find literally any beer that's drinkable, or subscribe to this in your podcast app of choice to make this part of your routine. And Tom, with that, do we want to open up the third beer?
I was gonna give you a transition. I was gonna say I am enjoying this conversation, Kayne, but not as much as I'm gonna enjoy this Blue Moon beer. So
that was clever. Both of you guys had good transitions.
See, that's fantastic. And we are not sponsored by any of these beers, and especially based on my reactions.
Kayne, I would say we are not sponsored by any of these beers yet.
Okay. One that I find that I like. All right, there we go.
So this is Blue Moon.
Beer number 3.
Beer you can find in almost any bar on a tap. So it's very common.
See, I wouldn't know that because I'm truly not a beer drinker.
You'll find this in an airport for sure. Yeah.
Okay. This one's cloudy.
Yeah,
super
it's definitely
cloudy.
Unfiltered wheat. It's just like the shop top. It's both a Belgian style unfiltered wheat.
No, it's darker than the shock top. Shock top on the right, this one on the left.
You should smell the orange in it.
I smell the orange.
Blue Moon is famous for Valencia oranges.
Beer.
Personally, I'm not impressed. I think that's
why I love having guests on the show who aren't beer drinkers.
That's my least favorite of all the 3. I even went back for a second taste to make sure I wasn't crazy. That wasn't my favorite.
It is bubbly as heck. It's like super excited from a bubble perspective.
It's very fizzy.
It kind of looks like unfiltered apple juice. We'll see if it's better or worse than unfiltered apple cider.
You're going to be very disappointed if you're looking for apple juice.
Oh, yeah. Yep. That is far from it.
Oh.
Now, I suspect
goodness.
if you had not already drank two other parts of two other beers, and we are not getting sloshed on this show, I suspect you would maybe have a different take on Blue Moon. Your palate is a little, I would say, altered to the taste of it. It should taste very, very similar to the Shock Top.
Can I go back and try the Shock
Tom.
Top?
I've got a cracker.
Am I allowed to go back?
There's no rules here, Victoria.
Oh,
there is no rule, so you can do whatever you like. Yeah.
I don't know. I like the Shock Top better.
Well, the folks at Shock Top are going to be happy to hear that.
Yeah, I definitely like that one better. The Blue Moon is maybe it's too fizzy for me. I don't know.
That could be.
I've had a cracker. I had my audio off. Did my audio come back in?
I can hear you.
Fantastic. I've had a cracker. I've had some water. I'm going to try the Blue Moon again to see if it's better on the second tasting.
Looks like it was better.
Not the worst thing that we've drank on this show.
Oh, yeah. We'll say that forever going forward, I think.
Cinnamon sticky bun ale, my nemesis. Let's go back to our FedRAMP conversation. So we were previously talking about FedRAMP, and continuous monitoring has come up on a lot of shows that we've talked about, just in terms of the level of intensity and effort.
Mm-hmm.
So, Victoria, have you traditionally done continuous monitoring on your FedRAMP packages in-house, or has this been something that you've outsourced before? And if you've outsourced it, how does that affect your role and responsibilities in the company as opposed to doing ConMon in-house?
So I have done both, not just for FedRAMP packages, but for like traditional RMF packages within a DoD environment. So I've got experience both kind of from a program management perspective of overseeing outsourced ConMon, and basically making sure all the boxes are being checked off, as well as kind of being the one, like the ISSO type role where I'm doing the ConMon as well, and maintaining that, the package. So I've got perspective from all different areas. The ConMon, for it being outsourced, you've got those continuous calls that we were having, multiple calls surrounding like a change board, and any vulnerabilities that needed to be remediated or certain things that were being stood up, as well as a weekly status call where we were going over any particular findings that were in the SIM, any changes that needed to be made outside of vulnerability management, how we were looking from all the FedRAMP required controls that are in ConMon. So you've got, your penetration tests, are those on track to be performed at a certain time? Vulnerability scans, were there any issues with uncredentialed scans? Things of that nature. So how it would affect my role, as opposed to doing it in-house to kind of bring it back around, it takes on more of a project management type hat instead of being the one actually going into the SIM, pulling those reports, pulling the vulnerability scan reports, performing remediation on those scans, making sure the policies are updated on an annual basis. I take on more of a program management role as opposed to the doer of ConMon.
Mm-hmm. No, and I assume you would agree with this, is that the avenue you go down or the path you choose on this is going to be largely dependent upon the capabilities of your team, how your resources are utilized. Mm-hmm. If you have the resources to do internally, I think most people would, at least in my experience from an information security perspective, most people who have the resources and the time would rather do it internally. But sometimes you're forced to go down a path externally, and you need to find the right partner and a good partner to do so. Absolutely.
That definitely comes down to, budgeting the requirements of the system, what the system looked like, upon its inception, and if we have done continuous monitoring from the start, or if that's something that we implemented just based on the requirements and the fact that we didn't have enough in-house bodies. There's a whole different, there's a ton of varying factors that come into play with that.
Agreed.
Okay. So it sounds like there's also a business decision to make there around if you've got budget, if you've got resources. But otherwise, as Tom said, it still sounds like it's a strategic capability that you'd prefer to keep in-house
Hmm.
unless you have constraints that you're working through. Yeah?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Cool. Well, I want to pivot to our next topic, which was the migration from R4 to R5,
Mm.
because that's kind of a significant update in the compliance requirements. Could you walk us through a little bit about the planning process for that migration and challenges you anticipate?
Oh, R4 to R5 is just a challenge in itself. There is an entirely new control family, the supply chain risk management family. So you have to basically either ensure if you haven't already implemented those controls, that you do implement those controls. Initially, from doing the R4 to R5, is the PMO office required everybody to perform kind of a gap analysis to see what controls needed to be updated. They provided all that documentation, and they had to, I can't remember specifically, but I want to say it was September 1st, to be able to provide that POAM and what that was going to look like, the R4 to R5 transition. Again, since we were having to build, once we built out that plan, of course there's the implementation of not only the technical controls but the policy level controls. So we have to build out reasonable and reasonable expectations to get that built out before the next annual security review, because that is the requirement that came from FedRAMP. Is your next security review, you need to be ready. That R5 needs to be done. There is also an additional I think it was a red team assessment that needs to get done in addition
That's
to
right.
the, yeah. So apologies, I'm a little fuzzy on that. Yeah, so there was an additional red team assessment that needed to be performed in addition to the penetration test and the annual security review. So that's something that changed from R4 to R5. That is obviously an additional expense. And then with the annual security review, you have to also take into account any significant changes to the system. So there's so many moving pieces with updating your policy level controls, performing technical control implementation, um, having to make sure that you're marking off all those items on the POAM that you've just identified as a gap, whether it's just a basic change in control or a more serious change, and closing out those POAM items before the security review. You've got the anticipation of the red team assessment, any significant changes to the system that need to be done during that security review. It is so much, and I think the migration in itself from Rev 4 to Rev 5, like that is the challenge. So that's it's a huge, massive
That's a
undertaking.
lot.
Yes,
It's a lot
it
right there.
is.
My goodness.
It's
Wow.
it's a lot. I'll like to put a point on the red team piece of it. I think when that got released, I think a lot of people were like, "Oh, red team. Well, we can do that."
Right.
And the reality is the level of diligence that the PMO is expecting around that red team exercise, it isn't like we've seen in some of the previous, sort of like additions or maybe strengthening of language,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where they say, well, there's going to be a ramp up time,
Mm-hmm.
and this year we'll expect one thing, but maybe next year we'll expect a little bit more. They have a pretty high expectation about what that red team engagement is going to look like. And the intelligence I've gotten from talking to 3PAOs is go out and find a reputable person, company or group that can do that.
Mm-hmm.
They're credible,
Yeah, absolutely.
and don't try to do it yourself.
That was the advice that I received as well. Was please don't try and do it in house. You probably don't have the resources, and if you do, you guys probably haven't gone through this from what the PMO office is looking for. Find a reputable and pay the money to get it done the right way, so you don't risk losing your authorization.
That's right.
Absolutely. And we've talked through a lot of different scenarios. And as we move to wrap up and eventually go to beer reviews, um, share with us some lessons that you've learned really about maintaining compliance with a federal sponsor, and then what advice you'd give to other companies in a similar situation.
So obviously, the biggest maintaining compliance is keeping up with your ConMon, staying up to date on what is being put out by FedRAMP, what is being put out by executive orders that are potentially changing the FedRAMP environment, keeping up with your ConMon, making sure that your POAM and your SSP are up to date, continuing to either outsource or hire new resources as your budget requires to ensure that you're keeping up with ConMon. I mean, ConMon is really that's how you're going to continue keeping your ATO in a good standing, and risk falling into a not ready status or in process. Keeping those communication lines open between your agency sponsor and yourself, keeping up with any updates that need to be put out. And then also, if any significant changes are done to the system that require an update to the FedRAMP marketplace, it's so much easier to just email the PMO office and let them know, hey, we have added on this additional service offering to our package. Here's our annual review, and they'll go in and update it. It's not a problem. So keeping everybody in the loop and keeping up with your ConMon are the biggest things.
I think that's great advice. I don't even have anything to add.
Fantastic. Well, I think at that point we get into beer reviews, and because we are reviewing 3 separate beers, I'm going to propose we do them one at a time. I will volunteer to go first on all 3 of these. And I will say we have a 10-point scale that we use, where 1 is that very cute kawaii art-inspired cinnamon sticky bun ale, and 10 is something that I don't believe exists.
Okay, so none of them are going to be a 10 for you, is what I'm hearing.
I think
my
highest has been a
5,
4. And we may have had a 5. I'm not sure. I think it's been a 4. So I'm going to start with the Blue Moon. This is the last beer that we tried, so it's had less time to oxidize. Actually, let's just do the Blue Moon in alphabetical order, not in appearance of order on the show.
Are we doing another taste?
Nope. That's still disappointing. Yeah, it's still. That's
I'm still not a fan.
I think having 3 beers in front of you has jilted you.
Me, of all people,
Yes.
jilted about beers? Never. All right, so I gave it a 2. Victoria and Tom, where are you coming in on the Blue Moon?
Go ahead, Victoria.
Can I give it like a half point, like a 1.5? Because it's.
You can
I don't even know that I give it a 2. It's bad. It's not good. Although I don't have a lot of beer experience, so I might be judging too harshly. I don't like it.
Yeah. I have drank a lot of Blue Moon in my life. Maybe we're up there with Busch Light in terms of the amount that I've drank in my life. So I know I like this beer.
Okay.
It is the first foray into craft beers for many people, and you put that orange slice in it and it becomes absolutely delightful. So I'm going to give this a 7.
Ooh.
In terms of my desire to continue to drink it. This is almost always in my fridge. In fact, I didn't have to buy it for this.
Oh my goodness.
For this exercise.
I wish I was allowed to send you.
Another 5.
Yeah, I was about to say I should continue my other 5. I'm not going to drink them.
Okay, next we are moving to Samuel Adams Summer Ale, which has the yellow label.
I did like this one.
And I will point out it is a lot more clear than the other 2 beers. And kind of, it's now more lemony. quite lemony and quite flat, and still kind of oily. I'll give it a 3. No, Tom. I'll give it a 3 because it's not as bad as a Blue Moon.
Okay.
I'm going to give this one like a 6, maybe a 7. I really like this. You know what? I'm a strong. Nice. I'm going to go for 7. I loved this one, actually. So I might potentially drink another 2, maybe.
Nice. That's excellent. I think this is a great beer. This is just like the other 2 that we drank today. This is a citrusy wheat beer. This one takes a lemon approach where the others take an orange approach. I'm sure that's the hop of choice. I think this is very good. It sustained for me, but this is the only beer I'm drinking all of today, by the way. So that should tell you something too. So okay, I like it.
So we need to send you the rest of ours. Apparently,
it's different. Well, I'll drink all these beers, so that's not going to be a problem. But yeah, I'll give this another strong 7. I think it's really good, and I will find some lemons to put in the rest.
I think that's going to be my next step because I put an orange in this one, so I'm gonna find a lemon and hook it up this time.
Nice.
And our final one is Shock Top, which has a fantastic orange slice with a haircut.
With a good vibe.
Yeah, we love the vibey mohawk that the orange has.
Okay, now it's more orangey. It's still quite boring, though. It doesn't. It actually is inoffensive. So, Tom, I will say this: of all the three that we've had to taste today, or all of the three that we've tasted today, of all the three I've suffered through, this is somewhere. But I'm going to go with 3.5. I'm going to give it the charity vote.
Of all the beers you've not loved before, this is a 3.5.
Yes, exactly. Because I dislike it the least out of these three.
All right, Victoria?
I'm going to say that was my favorite also. I initially thought that the summer ale was my favorite when we were trying them throughout the show, but I have now come back where this one is my favorite. I'm going to give this one an 8. So this one is good. I will be finishing it. And yeah, it was great. It was phenomenal. I don't like beer, but that changed me a little. So yeah.
Oh, wonderful. That makes my heart warm, Victoria, that we've made you a beer drinker on this show. I'll be honest, I still can't discern a big difference between this and the Blue Moon. It might be because I'm keeping them in the cans and pouring them as I drink them. Again, this is a very orange-based citrus wheat, so it has a lot of the same characteristics. I think it's delightful. Like I have no problem with this beer. I'll continue to drink it. I'll leave it at the same category. It's a 7 to me. You have to have a little more hop character to get past 7 with me, but
you're the true connoisseur.
Yeah, it has to be like a double hop IPA for him. Yeah, he's very much into that extra bubbly, hoppy, beery.
But I don't know about bubbly. I don't know where you come up with bubbly, hoppy
and bubbly
character.
Okay,
Delicious. These are all terms you could use.
At some point, my friend, we'll do a Scotch tasting. It'll be different. We'll try some really unusual Scotches, stuff that's like been.
Call me back for that one.
Fun stuff. That would be fun. Absolutely. We'll talk to the production team. But with that, that's all for today. So if you think you know a beer that I'd like, good luck. Or if you have a FedRAMP question, please do drop it in the comments below. And remember to like our LinkedIn and YouTube pages to hear live interviews with other information security professionals.
Thanks, you so Victoria. Much for having me, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you.